Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome to our live Instagram with Lisa. Let me find Lisa. Today we're going to talk about school goals, IEP goals in America and in different parts of the world. I think they're called different terms. So welcome everyone, come on in. Hi Lisa, I see you. So, okay, go live with Lisa Baskin Wright. All come from? Where are you from? I see.
Hi,
We always have international
I'm
people.
good. How
Hi,
are
Lisa.
you?
How are you? I'm good. I'm good. I've been meaning to do this chat because it's so
Yeah,
important,
no, I'm excited. I'm
right?
excited to be here.
Yeah. So I said a little bit about you. I just said that Lisa is a master IEP coach. But I'll just let you describe yourself as much as you feel
Oh,
comfortable
sure.
as we wait for
Well,
people to
yes.
come in.
Hi, and hi to everybody that's joining. Yes, so I'm Lisa Wright, and I am an IEP coach. I am a former high school math teacher. I've been a mentor for new teachers, Gen Ed K-12 for many years. I'm not doing it now because my work as a coach has kind of taken over, which is awesome. And I'm also the parent of a 17-year-old autistic ADHD daughter. So,
Mm,
yes,
like me.
exactly, exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Excuse me.
It's okay. I wanted to just start today's conversation um to remind everyone that people don't know, we
100%.
don't know what we don't know, right? So for me, I actually worked with autistic kids before I had my own neurodivergent kids. So at that point, 30 plus years ago, I thought I was doing the best thing
Sure.
in the world, you know. So yes, so some of you guys might know that I am a former behaviorist. I am not shy about it because that was part of my journey, and that was the reason that I found autistic kids in this population, which I'm still serving to today. And once I became a parent, Lisa, I also made a lot of mistakes. As
Of
I'm sure you have a
course.
similar journey. Things like, oh, I mean, this method made a lot of sense, so let's see if we could like add that into our
Right?
family schedule
Of
and
course.
these kind of things. And it's right. So I think what I've learned through my journey as a professional, as an autistic mama, two neurodivergent teens, and also as an autistic person, it's like you are not,
That's right.
we're all human beings. I think that's
Right.
where we forget, right? So that's what I want to talk to you about, these
Yeah.
goals that people try to write for human beings, and yet what's the problem with these goals,
There's a
Lisa?
lot. There's a lot, Ron. I mean, I
Yes.
say this and
Okay.
I'm still trying to find the right words. I feel like I say the same thing and like twist my
Right.
words every time. But
Right.
basically, I feel like when we're writing autistic goals, IEP goals for autistic and neurodivergent students, it's like we lose all common sense,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think
Right.
most of the folks writing these goals, and I'm not trying to like throw anybody under the bus, but it's like we don't press pause
Right.
and think, gosh, would I want somebody treating me this way? Right? So we don't see
Yeah.
that human connection of maybe this isn't best practice, right? Because we've been fed the
Right.
narrative that like this is what you're supposed to do for autistic kids, and this is what autistic kids need, and we forget that whole human element, that whole common sense element of like, I don't think this makes
Right.
sense, Right. And so for a lot of us, whether, you know, I mean, Julia was an ABA for 2 years, and there was a lot of it that like rubbed me really wrong. But we lack the confidence if we don't have the knowledge to say like, this is ick for me. Right. You know?
Right. Yeah. And also we
Yeah.
didn't know other ways, I think, other programs. I always say to the parents I work with, the first thing I say is like, you are all great parents. You've done, like, you've come this far to look at what your child is actually doing today. And it's such a big accomplishment for parents. Parents forget that they're doing what they can, you know, and I think professionals don't say that enough to parents. And during the IP meetings, I wish that parents and along with their autistic child, they should be the center of that meeting, the heart of that meeting, and otherwise it just goes like nowhere. Like, how many times do you have examples of IEP objectives that actually make you wonder, why is it even here? Like, why do we come up with these objectives
I do, and I find often, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but you know, oftentimes I find that, especially recently in the last maybe 4, 5, 6 months, you know, families that are coming to me for their children, right? Oh, am I still here?
Hello? Yeah, okay.
Am I here?
It's trying to come back, I think.
Just let me know. Okay, I'm close to my router,
You're here.
Never know,
okay.
because
Yeah, you're here.
where I live is never fantastic.
You
I
never
apologize.
know. Okay. Just
sure.
you just repeat
absolutely. So what I'm
you
saying
said.
In the last maybe 4, 5, 6 months, the families that have come to me really want to look at neurodiversity affirming goals, right? Like, there's something about the IEP, it doesn't sit well with them. They're not sure. Yeah, my Wi-Fi is acting weird. I apologize. And so
that's okay.
What I do is, often kids, you know, the IEP goals can span academics, they can span social, they can span communication, so on and so forth. So whenever there are academic goals, I find myself, you know, Googling, because Google's a good friend, right? Like, whatever state that family happens to be in, like, what are the standards, the academic standards for whatever area of
right.
Within ELA, within English Language Arts, there are speaking and listening goals. And they are terribly ableist. Right? It's the back and forth combination. It's the conversation, excuse me, right? You know, so it's informative to me of like, oh, now I have a sense of where some of that stuff is coming from. But I still think it's trash, right? Like, the law is helpful in many, many ways, and it's ableist. And like, I just can't be part of the cycle of harm, because I do now know better. And I feel like there are so many parents out there that there's like a voice in the back of their head kind of gnawing at them saying, this isn't sitting right, this doesn't feel right, I don't love this, but I don't have the power in this space to open up my mouth. And what can often happen at the IEP table is it becomes procedural. We're supposed to talk about present levels, then we're supposed to talk about goals, then we're supposed to move into this, then we're supposed to, right? And parents just are like, okay, here we go, right? Really overwhelming. And I have a lot of families that come to me saying, I nodded my head, I said, yes, I didn't know, I don't feel good about the head nod, right? Like, I don't feel good about kind of agreeing to this, but I don't know how to like press pause, go into rewind, and then re-enter with these questions. And every state is different, right? So like for you and I in California, an IEP can't be put into place until a parent has signed consent. But that is not
Yeah.
true in every state across the union,
Yeah.
and so
Right.
it looks different
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
where you are and what that process looks like. That doesn't mean that if you happen to be in Maryland
Right.
or Illinois or one of these states where they don't need your signature,
Mm-hmm.
that you can't still give input and say, hey guys, can we come back to the drawing board? It just is, it's a little bit different, a little bit different.
Yeah. 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 So writing the goals um, is one thing, but also who's accountable for the goals and
Right.
how they're implemented and how those goals become foundational pieces that could carry over to the next grade. I think, you know, it's very rare that you see there is that continuity and
Right.
so on, right? So a lot of times the goals are like just bits and
Right. Yeah.
pieces, but
Yeah.
they're
I mean,
not
and again,
connected.
this is another thing that
Right.
really varies, right? Like I have a number of families I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with that have children who are autistic, Gestalt language processors in the earlier stages of natural language acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
preschool age in New York.
Right.
And every single one of those kids, I mean,
Right.
the IEPs are like carbon copies of each other. They have a minimum of 18 goals in them.
Right.
Under each goal, there's a minimum of 3 objectives. It's all the same stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, and then there's other IEPs where they're so bare bones that it's like you read it and I'm not sure what skill you're trying to support. Like, I don't know that somebody could pick this up and be like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
this is how I support this
Yeah.
student. This is the kind of learner they are, right?
Yeah.
And there's,
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to write goals that kind of paint the picture, right? They pass the stranger test, right? You could pick it up and
Right.
be like, oh, with this tool,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take this approach. This is this
Mm-hmm.
kind of learner. This is the skill we're doing, right? If it's a Gestalt, yeah, goal banks, exactly, Isa, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of those goal banks are just, they're trash, sorry.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just not
Yeah.
thoughtful, right?
So
Like,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like to think about
Yeah.
the individual person when I'm writing those goals, right? So if we're
Right.
thinking about, you know,
Yes.
building communication skills, well, so many of our autistic learners are Gestalt language processors. And
Right.
I am in no way an expert. I am not a speech language pathologist, but
Mm-hmm.
it was one of those like
Right.
hindsight is 2020 kind of things. When I started to learn
Mm-hmm.
more about Gestalt language processing, that it was like, oh,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
Julia was 8 and diagnosed autistic, they did say something about Gestalt, but it was
Mm-hmm.
like a 2-second conversation in passing, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
she
it.
very
Right.
much so,
Yeah.
has spontaneous novel language, but the
Mm-hmm.
strategy of modeling gestalts, practicing scripts in
Mm-hmm.
anticipation of
Mm-hmm.
either a stressful social situation or a situation where she needs to advocate for herself, maybe with a teacher, like that's the strategy that
Yeah.
is supportive to her.
Yeah.
She needs that practice and that modeling of
Mm-hmm.
what it could look like. I mean, even in academics, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Right.
even though she's moved through the stages, like I think it was Katya Piscatelli, Boho Speechy, that put out a post the other day that it's like a Gestalt language processor is a Gestalt language processor. Like it kind of doesn't matter,
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to be thinking about who is this learner? What are their interests?
Right.
What are their strengths?
Mm-hmm.
And how are we building that into the goals to leverage some of those things so
Right.
that we can flex
Mm-hmm.
the muscle that needs a little bit of stretching and growing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and those blanket
Yeah.
goal banks just
Yeah.
don't do it. Right. Yeah. They're not individualized. 100%.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So for parents here, when you go into your IEP, just walk into the IEP meeting feeling confident that your input is
Absolutely.
so valuable because you see your child at their best, at their worst. You're the ones navigating the day-to-day autistic living for your family members. So your input. So I want everyone to walk into the room because
Oh,
it's like
100%.
scary for a lot of
Absolutely.
parents, right? Especially if this is the first one, the first school year, it's very scary. But know that you know the best. You know your autistic child the best. And don't be afraid if your gut feeling is telling you, or something's not right. That I really don't like. Why is that there?
Right.
Then ask why is
Totally.
that there?
Yeah,
Ask.
absolutely.
Ask if something doesn't sit right with you. You don't know why there is this particular goal or how it's written. Ask
Absolutely. And
why.
ask what it looks like,
So,
right? I'm really
right, right.
confused about such and such goal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a difficult
Correct.
time wrapping my head
Mm-hmm.
around kind of what skill
Mm-hmm.
is supporting, or
Yes.
how, what you're doing to
Yeah.
support this particular skill development. Like, paint the picture for me. What
Yeah.
does this look like?
Yeah.
Because then you can
Yes.
say,
Give me an
oh,
example. Yeah. Yeah.
oftentimes it's like, oh, that makes me feel so much better, right? Like, it doesn't read that way
Right.
on paper. What you're actually doing is not coming across. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe can we tweak things so it better matches your
Right.
explanation? But also,
Yes.
if there's
Right.
something there where you're like,
Exactly.
oh gosh,
Exactly.
cringe, no, please don't, then you have created the space to
Right.
be able to say, hey, you know what? That makes me pretty uncomfortable. Can we rethink this?
Yes. Exactly. So parents, you are your child's advocate. So you have to
Yeah,
just say it if
100%.
something doesn't sit right, right? And the other thing also, the way goals are written, this is another tip for parents. When you read those goals and you're reading it out loud to your child, then the way those goals are worded need to be in such
That's
a
right.
way that it's respectful and empowering the student. If you don't feel comfortable reading those
Right.
IEP goals, it
A hundred
needs to go
percent.
back written to make other people feel comfortable, but not your child,
Right. No,
right?
absolutely. I think it was last spring. I have a family that I'm working with, and it was an eighth grade student,
Mm-hmm.
and the meeting was virtual, and the student was home. And,
Right.
they had actually joined the meeting for the
Yeah.
first part and had written a letter to the team. I mean, really impressive kid. And had put forward what their needs were and what their hopes
Mm-hmm.
were for high school. And I mean, just remarkable.
Right.
And then, excused themselves and said, thank you, I'm good. But stayed off camera for the remainder of the meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, unfortunately, it took this downward turn, and
Right.
their voice was really pretty disrespected.
Mm.
And the child was in absolute hysterics
Aw.
off camera, right?
Right.
So mom
Right.
is trying to manage big feelings and
Yeah.
trying not to throw
Right.
something at the computer and all the things,
Right.
right? And I remember getting on and making a reel, like right in that moment of, you need to assume, especially
Yeah.
if it's a virtual meeting, that the child can hear you. But you
Yes.
should act as though the child can hear you, whether that's physically possible in the moment or not, right? So you should
Yeah.
write the IEP in such a
Correct.
way, like, especially as kids get older, like, it's their IEP. It
Right.
is their program. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're embarrassed, or oh gosh, I don't want them to
Mm-hmm.
read, or this
It's
isn't written in a, like, that should be
there's
a
something wrong with
real
it.
red
Yeah.
flag to you, to say, hey, wait a
Absolutely.
second. And a child should have say in what they're working on, right? And
Right. Right.
whatever way they can give that feedback to the team, right? For our little
Mm-hmm.
ones, maybe that comes
Mm-hmm.
through in behavior, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But we need to be paying attention and amplifying that in the meeting, 100%.
Absolutely. So I actually just turned to Dr. Google to pull up some.
Oh, good. Let's do it, Macy. Let's break
Because
Dr. Google
everyone turns
apart.
to Dr. Google when they're new at on this journey. So let's give some tips and help some parents to rewrite some goals in
Okay.
a much more
Oh, good.
respectful
Let's go.
and
Let's put me on the
affirming
spot.
ways for, no, we'll do it together. It's just like brainstorming. So, okay. So if there is like best practices when writing one IEP goal, right? So we have to consider the students' sensory needs,
100%.
sensory regulation, and the types of support that student might need. So
Absolutely.
for me, I'll just use myself as an example. I have auditory processing difficulties, meaning in the classroom setting, I will just get bits and pieces, and that would vary depending on like how much bandwidth I have for that particular day, right?
Of course.
So
Absolutely.
yes, so that needs to be considered. And the adult guides have to know for each student what would be an appropriate accommodation to help someone who cannot process with it. If there's complex background noise, I just have no idea.
Right.
You might as well just put me separately in a book with the text on the subject to read, because I will learn much faster. Like I would learn more, right? Be more present, as opposed to expecting me to pretend that I understand to the teacher. I could be looking at you like this. I would have, that's what I used to do.
Right. Sure.
No clue. No clue.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so
take that concept of whole body listening and
exactly. I used to do that. Yes.
Right.
So all of these, what I just described, needs to be discussed during the IEP meeting, and for each goal that needs to be captured, right, depending on the subject, of course. So like for example, I just put in IEP goals for autism. And
it's depressing when you do that.
Question. Okay, so the first one was about understanding their own and others' emotions. Okay, so why? So the first question you would ask is why, right? Sure. Is there a reason that we need this particular goals about emotions?
No.
Yeah, correct.
Right. Look, I think that and I may mispronounce this, alexithymia. Right. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Alexithymia. Yep, right.
Alexithymia. Thank you. Is a common kind of co-occurrence for autistic folks, right? Like understanding those emotions is challenging.
Right.
So I am very much so a proponent of building that self-determination, that double empathy problem. Right. Yes, totally. That is absolutely a thing too. 100%. I think it's really important for somebody to have a strong sense of self and to know who they are.
Right.
But we need to match the learning style.
Right.
Right. And so that's why I love like Autism Level Up.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Where we're looking more at energy level. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I know with my daughter, she will just say to me like, I don't know how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. She's telling the truth.
Yeah. Right. I have no idea. She's like, but I cannot sit still. I am so fidgety. I am so wiggly. I am so Yeah. And then it's like, great, we can work with that. But I'm not like, well, you have to tell me, are you frustrated? Are you up? Right. Like, what are you sad about? Right.
Yeah.
All this like matching faces and all this kind of thing. So I just think that those kinds of emotion goals are kind of they're ableist, number one.
Very much.
And number two, we're really looking through the lens of a neurotypical person. Like, well, this is important in the neurotypical world.
Right.
And so therefore it's just important because, we're the dominant paradigm here, right? Like that's what we think. Mm-hmm. And so we set the stage for what we think is important. And I think the double empathy problem is really critical here, is that there's a gap in communication styles, and autistic people tend to really understand and communicate well with and flow well with other autistic folks. Yeah. And neurotypical people can have that flow with one another. And then there's like this barrier between the two. But the expectation is that the autistic person is supposed to learn the neurotypical way and then adjust and somehow put that on as a suit and wear it.
Yeah.
Which is very dangerous.
Yes, exactly.
And
absolutely.
There's nothing reciprocating the other direction.
Yeah.
There's no like, hey, my autistic friend sometimes just needs quiet and to share space.
Right.
And that's okay. I'm going to read and recognize that cue and not push my way on that. Right. Like we don't push that narrative. We push the, the autistic person is supposed to learn the neurotypical way because that's the way we're supposed to communicate, air quotes for those that are just listening and not watching. And what we do is we cause a lot of harm because we're essentially telling these people, these humans, the way you human is wrong.
Or bad.
It's bad. Like
wrong, bad.
You're a broken human.
Unsophisticated.
Right? You don't do it right.
Correct.
Right? Instead of getting super curious about like, oh, well, this is how you learn and this is how you like to play and this is how you like to engage. And that's awesome. And everybody kind of has their own way. And here are some other ways of learning what other people, right? Like,
correct.
Where we're then empowering the autistic person to go, hey, you know what? I really prefer to be around folks that communicate and engage and play and honor my boundaries in the ways that work for me so I can have more autonomy around those kinds of decision making instead of like, I'm just masking all the time or I just feel like garbage all the time or whatever it may be. And I do think, I will say, for folks that are not as far along in their learning journey about the impact of some of these goals, the intent is kind, right? The impact is terrible, but the intent is kind. The intent is, especially like at those younger years, that preschool, those early elementary years, it's like, I know when you go to school, you're going to be expected to sit for long periods of time in class that you maybe don't like. You're going to expect to listen to the teacher and take notes. You're going to, whatever those neurotypical expectations are. So I think I'm doing right by you by trying to prepare you for those things. And what I don't realize is that in the process of trying to do that, I'm literally like destroying your soul.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think the why behind this particular goal, understanding their own and others' emotions, if we ask the team, why does a student need this goal? And we hear the examples would be, well, the student likes to hit and show no remorse.
Right.
That's probably why this is written in there, right?
Right.
Exactly.
They need to understand the other person's perspective.
Yes.
Right. So perspective taking becomes this big thing. And I'm sorry, harmonic divergence. I don't know your real name, but I think you hit the nail on Camille. Hi, Camille. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Is that it's not about that autistic people don't understand another person's perspective per se. It's that we're not sort of spreading that love out evenly, number one. And we're expecting the autistic learner like to put on kind of a neurotypical hat and learn about perspective through a neurotypical lens. So we don't need those goals. We don't need this goal. No, we don't need
no. And I'll read a couple more goals and maybe we can help parents kind of have not a template, like best practices, best guidelines when they're proposing goals. So the second one here is understanding others' body language and monitoring their own. Same difference. And the third one is understanding facial expressions during conversation.
Right, it's the
same difference. Same difference. Same thing.
Right, it's all the same nonsense.
Right. So a better way to write a goal under social communication would be, you want to start with the students' perspectives. So I think with any human being, if there is really nothing for them, nothing in it for them to like be together with the other person, then it's not really, it's just work, or it's just,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's not social in nature, because it's not based on what I would like to get to know this person or not. Right? Right.
Right.
So if you rewrite this in a more affirming way, it would be, given the autistic students personal choice or interests, then something like that. So I would say that would be, that's how I would write it, given the
Right.
students. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you have to take into consideration, and you know this obviously, but we need to take into consideration kind of the students, where they're at with communication.
Right.
Right. Where that individual learner is in their own development. Right.
Right.
But I think, you know, turning the focus towards learning about themselves first is important. Mm-hmm. Right. You know, learning about my own energy.
Right.
You know, listening to that intuition of, this does not feel safe to me. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I'm out.
Right. Right.
You know, because I think what happens is, I think issues get conflated at the IEP table.
Right.
That there's this concern that, like, pardon the terrible expression, like the tail is wagging the dog, right? You know, if we just mm-hmm. let students, you know, say no to everything and not do the tough, like the non-preferred task, probably my least favorite expression.
Right.
You know, then they're just going to think they can get away with anything, and they're never going to build that stamina for like working through something that's mm-hmm. hard. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right? I want ultimately for a learner, for mm-hmm. a human, to be able to kind of look around the room and be like, okay, mm-hmm. the folks that are here are safe. I'm safe.
Right.
Like, take inventory. Right. I'm safe. I need this fidget. I need this seating, different seating arrangement. I need I need whatever mm-hmm. it is to regulate my body. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can take the deep breath. I'm safe. Mm-hmm. I can push through the thing that's hard. Right. That's one thing. I also absolutely want that same individual to be able to be in a situation and go, you know what? I don't feel safe.
Right.
Or I just am not enjoying this at all. Yeah. This doesn't feel okay to me. Yeah. And I need to get out of this situation because I think when the goals are so like compliance driven and you've got to push through discomfort for this non-preferred whatever, mm-hmm. we're building self-doubt.
Right.
We're building ignoring intuition mm-hmm. so that, and we have to be realistic that autistic people are mm-hmm. far more likely to be targets of bullying, sexual assault.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
Like, statistically, more vulnerable population.
Right.
We can't be essentially grooming these kids to not listen to themselves.
Right.
Oh, adults are allowed to do to me whatever they want to do, and I'm supposed to just follow suit.
I'm supposed to comply.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm supposed to comply, and my voice doesn't matter.
Right.
And I'm just supposed, I mean, like, you know, with my mm-hmm. own daughter, she was in a situation a few mm-hmm. years ago mm-hmm. where a friend was texting her really inappropriate stuff. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know. And Aaron didn't know. And it wasn't till I got a text from the other parent saying, oh, mm-hmm. gosh, so sorry. I just read the text exchange. Mm-hmm. Is Julia okay?
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you for alerting me that there was a problem. I didn't know there was one, right? So I went to her and said, hey, what happened with the text? And, you know, and mm-hmm. she said, I didn't want him to get in trouble. Right? Like, his getting in trouble was more important than her being completely violent. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It wasn't until we essentially gave her permission to say, no.
That's not
your voice, your perspective, your feelings all matter here. Yeah. And if somebody crosses a line with you, mm-hmm. you get to alert your safe people. Yeah. We're not worrying about if he's
Right.
in trouble or not in trouble. We're worrying about you, and are you in
Right.
trouble emotionally?
Yeah.
You know, and I think Erin and I are relatively on top of it parents, and she's certainly been raised in a home where her voice matters, but there was enough of that compliance type stuff, and she naturally sort of leans towards thinking that she doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That we've got to be really, really careful.
Yeah.
Really careful.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly adult guides shouldn't be part of that at all, you know. So I think communication goals, grouping of IEP goals, that's common. But I think the way we need to change it is autistic communication. Um, all kinds of autistic communication are valid,
100%.
right? So an IEP goal under the banner of communication would be something like when given access to all preferred communication, student A would be blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Right? So that's the formula. So you want to put the student's name first. That's what I would do under the communication banner. You want to make sure that all autistic communication are honored, because some days we're not able to use our mouth words. Some days using texting, that's too complicated.
100%.
So we need multiple ways.
That's
Your autistic kids need to know for them to be able to initiate communication in so many different ways, and those are all okay. There's not one that's higher than the other, because
that's right.
Right.
And there's too much emphasis on mouth words, on verbal speech.
Yes, absolutely.
And I had, I'll call it a conversation.
Okay.
With an IEP team, with a verbal child, that the behavioral goal was that they would speak, you know, whatever, right? And I said,
no.
you know, I think we need to really be cognizant here,
right,
that it's not uncommon when an autistic person, or anyone really, but we'll leave it in the realm of this, the student was autistic, loses access to mouth words, to verbal speech. And we need to be honoring all forms of communication and providing tools to support all forms of communication. And it doesn't mean that we're like taking a step back. It means we're honoring the whole person. And then we need to respond to whatever that communication is. Like, this hierarchy of thinking that like somehow AAC or gestures, I mean, truly, like neurotypical people, a lot of our communication is unspoken as well. Right? I mean, just go back to the goal you read about reading facial expressions. Correct.
You're right.
Right? Like, it's built into neurotypical communication. So again, back to my where does common sense go? Why aren't we honoring all forms of communication with our autistic learners?
Yes.
Why do we get stuck?
Correct.
And thinking it has to be one thing or the other.
Correct. So those are all what we just discussed would fall under the communication banner. So no
100%.
eye contact, because, well, first of all, no one can move your eyeballs. You know what I mean? So eye gaze and eye gaze aversion is just a part of a natural human communication.
100%.
So no one should be given a goal where they need to be controlled when and how they use their eye gaze.
100%.
Right? Yes.
100%.
So no on that one.
Absolutely.
We talk about all types of communication preferences. So those are all under communication. The reciprocation, that back and forth, that's another one that's always driving me nuts, because autistic and neurotypical back and forth, when we consider reciprocation, looks, and qualitatively, it's very, very different. Right. So for autistic students, it's very interest-centered. So on the IEP goal, it should be written, given the option to use interest-centered topics student A would be able to blah, blah, blah. Right. So you always start with that formula with the student. So the other grouping of objective that I think so important, it's under the banner of self-regulation.
Yeah.
And this is, Lisa, you mentioned Autism Level Up. They're going to have an online class beginning on March, on rewriting IEP goals. So
awesome.
I'm going to sign up on
Well, I
that.
put out
Yes.
that handout, that multi-page handout.
Yes.
That I found myself like laughing out loud, like, and cheering and standing ovation. Like, yes, right? Like the big problem, little problem type goals that made me want to like rip my eyelashes out.
Yeah. Because
the
it's very
narrative
subjective.
that they added to that was so on point, right? Like, how do you know what's a big problem or a little problem for me?
Yeah,
in fact,
it's
I
very
hate to tell
subjective.
you, but like, you're part of the problem.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Yeah, you are part of the problem. If the student doesn't feel safe around you, then you are part of the problem. And it doesn't matter how well or robust the goals are written for the student will never get there because those goalposts were not created for the student, and then therefore the goalposts will always be moving moving and moving, for the student. So that self-regulation goal, I think, need to be across instead of implemented by the OTs and only for the OT. That's the way it's like, it's very divided, right? So that's important. And self-advocacy is another important banner.
Huge.
Right.
Huge.
Yeah.
And both of those things, maybe self-advocacy even more, are broad, right?
Right.
Self-advocacy, it's like, it's not just that the kid can raise their hand in class and you come over, right? Like, it's so nuanced. It's so complex.
Yeah.
It spans so many situations. So you really, I'm repeating myself, but like, you have to get super curious about who the specific child is in this moment, in their learning. Where are they? And this came up, it comes up always, but I often see this with like behavior stuff, right? When we start to go down the behavior rabbit hole and the FBAs and all that kind of stuff, that we do a shallow investigation, for lack of a better word, right? We look at ABC data, which deeply flawed. But we use the same measuring stick, right? We look at disruptive, avoided, right? Like we look at whatever we look at, but we're looking at much more like the stereotypical model we have in our head of what an autistic student looks like.
Right.
And it's so much more nuanced than that. So if you have a child that is hyper compliant and shuts down internally, and like you were saying, that you were just sitting and looking at the teacher in that direction, and like nothing's really going in, but I'm sure they were like, Maisie's such a great student, so compliant, right?
That was like, totally me.
Right? You're like, yeah, I'm amazing. Yes. And I haven't learned a darn thing in your class.
Right. That's right.
And I feel lousy about myself because it's like, am I a fraud? Because I'm right. Like there's this disconnect between what everybody says about you and what you know is your truth. And then you question, do I know my right? Like it just goes in all these different bad places. That I just don't think we just don't get curious enough, and we don't individualize and nuance that measuring stick enough, right? Like, who is this learner? So what will this look like for this particular learner?
Well, I think this is also another keep in mind for parents. If you see a goal for under the banner of self-advocacy, so usually what it looks like for our kiddos are anything with the name of initiation. Like I'm looking at it like responding to another person's initiation. Well, what about the other person's responsibility and accountability to respond to the autistic student? So communication is a two-way street. So if someone suggests for your child to be able to initiate, or respond to initiation, then we can vocalize that, well, what would you do? How would you facilitate for this other student, for the buddy to also respond and initiate?
Great.
That's
point.
right. So rewrite that. And I think initiation has to do with how safe a person is, right?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
That is something that I think it's not part of, like, emotional safety is never part of like any training, and every classroom needs to really work hard to establish that.
Right. And of
So
course it's central.
it's so central. If you have
Everything.
emotional safety, then you have students interacting, supporting each other, and communicating with each other. That's just because they feel free, right? Kids should be feeling free, and they shouldn't be worried about making mistakes or getting high marks or getting 8 out of 10 opportunities. So anyways, so
or my least favorite, a food reward.
Oh my gosh, it's still being used. I know an autistic para educator
so mad.
back east, and he told me that all of his students have rotten teeth because they're given candies to perform. Still,
right.
Today,
100%.
A classroom today.
Oh, I see it all the time,
yes.
And I'm like, can we not? And just not?
Yeah.
Please, please, and thank you.
Exactly.
Like, it's a no.
Yeah.
It's a no.
So I think, do you all have any questions? I didn't really see any questions. Camille made a few comments. You can scroll. Hello. We lost Lisa. Lisa, come back in. If you have any questions, you can write it here. Hello? We lost Lisa. Well, I don't know. Maybe Lisa lost her Wi-Fi, but thank you so much for joining us. And I will. Hi, Camille. Thank you for hanging out with us. But hopefully it's helpful. I'll write a summary and publish this recording, and also give you the resources for Autism Level Up for your IEP. Oh, Lisa's back. Lisa. Lisa? Ah, there you are.
So sorry.
That's
I tried
okay.
to scroll up and it switched screens, and then it wouldn't let me back in. So I was like, I'm just going to leave and come back.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm so tech savvy.
Yeah, that's okay. That's because you have big thumbs, and it's not as ambidextrous.
Who knows?
It's a thumb thing.
Sticky fingers. I have sticky fingers.
Yes.
Maybe, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think
Thank you,
I don't think we have any more questions. If you guys have any other questions, you can put it after this recording is published. And yeah, if you have any needs for IEP support, go talk to Lisa, because I don't go to IEPs because it's not good for my high blood pressure. So Lisa, just make sure.
I do go to IEPs.
Stay calm.
And sometimes they're really great, and other times it's not good for my blood pressure either. But that's
there
when
you
my
go.
12-year-old very snarky humor carries me through.
Yeah. Just call Lisa. So thank you so much, Lisa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. So good to see you. I apologize for my tech issues.
No worries. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good afternoon, evening.